The humid night air hung thick over the quiet stretch of road outside Oakridge, a small town where secrets festered beneath the surface. Darius Cole, a black man in his mid-30s, drove his matte black Chevrolet Camaro down the deserted street, his fingers drumming against the leather steering wheel. He was in town for what should have been a routine check-in, nothing out of the ordinary for his line of work. Officially, Darius was a federal investigator. Unofficially, he worked for an undisclosed intelligence agency handling sensitive undercover operations. His mission was straightforward: track and report the activities of a corrupt faction of law enforcement in Oakridge rumored to be involved in illegal dealings. He hadn't expected the situation to spiral so quickly. The first sign of trouble came in the form of flashing red and blue lights. The shrill wail of a police siren cut through the silence of the night. Darius sighed. He had done nothing wrong, but experience told him that didn't matter. He pulled over, the powerful engine of his Camaro purring as it idled. Two officers approached his car. Their faces were hidden beneath the glow of their patrol car's lights, but their body language oozed aggression. License and registration. The taller one barked, a burly man with a thick mustache and an all-too-familiar smirk. His name tag read Officer Sergeant Mark Henshaw. The other officer, younger but just as hostile, stood a few steps back, hand resting on his holstered gun. Darius complied, moving with deliberate caution, hands in plain sight. "Is there a problem, officer?" "You tell me." Sergeant Mark Henshaw sneered. "You don't look like you belong around here." Darius kept his face neutral. "I was just passing through. Didn't realize that was a crime." Sergeant Mark Henshaw chuckled, sharing a glance with his partner. "Depends on who you ask. Step out of the vehicle." Darius hesitated. He knew his rights, but he also knew that resisting, even legally, could make things worse. "Sir, I haven't done anything wrong." Sergeant Mark Henshaw yanked open the door, his patience already worn thin. "Did I stutter?" Darius clenched his jaw, but did as he was told. He stepped onto the pavement, his hands raised slightly. The younger cop, Officer Tyler Grady, circled the car, peering through the tinted windows. "Nice ride," he muttered. "Must have cost a pretty penny. How'd you afford it?" Darius didn't respond. He had played this game before. They wanted him to get angry, to react. Sergeant Mark Henshaw stepped closer, his beer-stained breath filling the air. "You a drug dealer?" "A thug. Got something to hide." Darius remained calm. "No, officer. Just a man on his way home." Tyler Grady scoffed. "Home? Ain't no home for your kind in Oakridge." Then, without warning, Sergeant Mark Henshaw shoved Darius against the hood of the Camaro. Darius's muscles tensed, but he forced himself to remain still. If they ran his plates, they would find nothing but clean records. If they searched his car, they would find nothing illegal. But logic wasn't what fueled men like Sergeant Mark Henshaw and Tyler Grady. "This baby got drugs in it?" Sergeant Mark Henshaw asked as he pounded on the hood. "No," Darius replied through gritted teeth. "Then you won't mind if we take a little look." Sergeant Mark Henshaw smirked as he reached for the door handle. "You don't have probable cause," Darius said carefully. Sergeant Mark Henshaw's face darkened. "Oh, we got cause, all right." Before Darius could react, Tyler Grady flicked a cigarette onto the hood of the Camaro. The ember danced along the sleek paint. Darius's patience cracked. "Don't do that." Sergeant Mark Henshaw grinned. "Or what?" And then, with a slow, calculated motion, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a lighter, and flicked it on. "Say, Tyler Grady, you ever seen how fast one of these fancy cars burns?" Darius's blood ran cold. This wasn't just harassment anymore. It was something worse. Sergeant Mark Henshaw tossed the lighter. A small flame caught, and then everything erupted into chaos. The flames danced along the hood of the Camaro, licking at the glossy black paint, turning it into a bubbling mess. Darius's heart pounded as the acrid smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled the air. Sergeant Mark Henshaw and Tyler Grady stepped back, laughing. They were enjoying this. Darius clenched his fists. Every fiber of his being screamed at him to fight back, but he knew better. The second he laid a hand on them, they'd have the perfect excuse to shoot him down in self-defense. "Oops," Sergeant Mark Henshaw sneered. Guess that fancy ride of yours wasn't built for the heat. Darius took a deep breath, forcing himself to remain calm. They had no idea who they were messing with. Tyler Grady smirked. What's wrong? Cat got your tongue. Darius stared at the inferno consuming his car. This wasn't just about the vehicle, it was about power. They wanted to humiliate him, to remind him who they thought was in charge. But they had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. A small crowd had started to gather nearby, drawn in by the towering flames. Some held their phones up, recording. Good. Let the world see this. Sergeant Mark Henshaw noticed the cameras and scowled. Move along. Ain't nothing to see here. Darius slowly turned to face him. Oh, I think there's plenty to see. The fire crackled behind him, illuminating the hardened expression on his face. You're gonna pay for this, he said, voice calm, deadly. Sergeant Mark Henshaw laughed. Oh yeah, and what are you gonna do about it, boy? Darius took a slow step forward, meeting Sergeant Mark Henshaw's gaze without fear. You'll find out soon enough. Sergeant Mark Henshaw's smirk faltered. Something in Darius's voice sent a chill down his spine. You threatening me? He asked, gripping his baton. Darius didn't blink. No, I don't make threats. Sergeant Mark Henshaw opened his mouth to respond, but at that moment, the distant wail of sirens filled the night air. Backup was coming. Tyler Grady grabbed Sergeant Mark Henshaw's arm. We should get out of here. Sergeant Mark Henshaw hesitated, then spat on the ground. You got lucky tonight. Darius didn't respond. He just watched them retreat. But inside, he was already planning his next move. Because this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. By the time the fire department arrived, it was too late. The Camaro was reduced to a smoldering husk of metal and ash. Darius stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching as the firemen doused the last of the flames. His mind was already working, piecing together his next steps. He was supposed to be undercover, low profile. But Sergeant Mark Henshaw and Tyler Grady had just forced his hand. A familiar voice broke through his thoughts. Darius. He turned to see Detective Naomi Bishop, an old friend from his time at the academy. She was one of the few good cops in Oakridge, one of the few he could trust. She took one look at the burnt wreckage and shook her head. What the hell happened? Racist cops happened, Darius replied flatly. Naomi sighed. Let me guess, Sergeant Mark Henshaw, and his little lapdog, Tyler Grady. Naomi muttered a curse under her breath. Those two have been untouchable for years. Every time we get close to exposing them, evidence disappears. Witnesses go missing. You name it. Darius's jaw tightened. Not this time. Naomi eyed him warily. What are you planning? Darius met her gaze. Justice. She hesitated, then nodded. Then you'll need my help. Darius and Naomi spent the next few days gathering intel. Every dirty deal, every falsified report, every witness Sergeant Mark Henshaw and Tyler Grady had intimidated. It was all there, buried under years of corruption. But they needed something bigger, something undeniable. And Darius had a plan. Step 1, bait the hook. Naomi leaked a rumor that Darius had recovered sensitive documents from his burned car, documents that could expose the corrupt cops of Oakridge. It didn't take long for Sergeant Mark Henshaw to take the bait. 2 nights later, Darius sat alone in an abandoned warehouse just outside town. A laptop sat open in front of him, the screen flickering with fake classified files. A small recording device was hidden under his shirt. Then, like clockwork, Sergeant Mark Henshaw and Tyler Grady burst through the doors. Sergeant Mark Henshaw aimed a gun at him. You just don't know when to quit, do you? Darius didn't flinch. Seems like you don't either. Tyler Grady sneered. We know you don't got nothing real. But we can't have you running your mouth, now can we? Sergeant Mark Henshaw cocked his gun. We should have taken care of you the first time. Darius leaned back, completely at ease. Go ahead. Shoot me. Sergeant Mark Henshaw blinked. What? Darius smirked. You think I'd come here alone? With no backup? No cameras? Sergeant Mark Henshaw's face paled. He looked around. Check the walls, Darius said. See those little red lights? That's live footage, broadcasting straight to the feds. And your voices. He tapped his chest. Crystal clear on a wire. Tyler Grady started to panic. Shit, Sergeant Mark Henshaw, he's bluffing. Sergeant Mark Henshaw's hand shook. He pressed the gun against Darius's forehead. Turn it off. Now. Darius held his ground. Or what? You kill me on camera? That'd be a first, even for you. Sergeant Mark Henshaw's finger twitched on the trigger. And then the warehouse doors burst open. Naomi stormed in, gun raised. Behind her, a team of federal agents flooded the space. Sergeant Mark Henshaw and Tyler Grady didn't even have time to react before they were slammed to the ground, handcuffed, and dragged away. Darius dusted off his jacket. Took you long enough. Naomi grinned. Figured I'd let you have your dramatic moment. Darius chuckled. Appreciated. As Sergeant Mark Henshaw was dragged past, he locked eyes with Darius. Pure hate burned in his gaze. You think this is over? Sergeant Mark Henshaw growled. You think prison's gonna stop me? Darius stepped closer, lowering his voice just enough so only Sergeant Mark Henshaw could hear. I don't think, he said. I know. And with that, he turned away. In the weeks that followed, Sergeant Mark Henshaw and Tyler Grady's entire operation crumbled. The evidence Darius and Naomi collected led to multiple arrests, exposing a network of dirty cops, corrupt officials, and illegal activities spanning over a decade. Darius sat in a diner, sipping his coffee as he watched the news. Sergeant Mark Henshaw's mugshot flashed across the screen. Disgraced Officer James Sergeant Mark Henshaw has been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Darius smiled to himself. A waiter walked by. More coffee, sir? Darius nodded. Yeah, and bring me a slice of pie. I'm celebrating. Because justice had finally been served.